Hello, dear friends. Good afternoon. I hope to improve my technical skills in a very simple way. For example, to not have a window in my back. I notice this, of course, but sometimes I'm kind of stubborn or do not want to make bigger changes in the whole arrangement. You know what I mean? And also I think that to read a book by a teacher and sangha who have called their big love project every day Zen, it fits well. I think I fit well in it. So sometimes I'm quite good, sometimes I'm middle, sometimes I'm bad, sometimes I have a window in my back and one can hardly see me, and another time it's quite good. So it's also easier for me. So there is a deeper explanation. I can feel if it's really important to be kind of excellent in the how shall I put it, in what is shown, in what is performed. And here I think it is not at all about excellence. And I'm glad actually that I have some ambitions still, but I'm happy that they go, and I also want to let them go. It is so kind of oppressing. We oppress ourselves, I find, with our ambitions, don't you think? So in my age, I really do not reserve a place for ambition and competition, and I let them go. And life is much more fun. So let's start. It is about the reading project from the book What is Zen? Plain Talk for a Beginner's Mind, written or put together by Norman Fischer, Roshi, and Susan Moon Sensei. And until this day, we have read the chapters, and I repeat that so that you might become curious, more curious than you probably are now. Until today we had the chapters 1 to 7. What's the point? Zazen, form and ritual, awakening, history, beliefs and ethics, and teachings. So today it is about chapter 8. And before we start, we will sit. Sometimes in German, I call the sit with people who are not familiar with formal sitting practice. I call them stille Übungen, exercising in silence. And may this be a small or a modest exercise in silence. And you decide if you want to stay here. I will start with the reading of the next chapter 10 minutes to 4. So you may leave your eyes closed if you want. I want to give an impulse for us now in the next minutes to reflect to our first associations when we are thinking of our first school teachers, or perhaps really the first. But I want to focus more on the good experiences of teachers, of early teachers. So again, you may remain with eyes closed, and recall a situation really bad you had with a teacher in your life. Still, you may leave your eyes closed for the last 2 minutes and briefly reflect on the far-reaching consequences, ripple effects of the very good experience with a teacher and the very bad one. We will perhaps never know what were exactly the effects, because we know that a really bad situation may miraculously or by hard work turn out to be a positive one. But here I want to more focus on a really good example, a really lighthouse we had for our further way through life. So if you want, you may open your eyes, and the silent exercise is now over. I'm greeting you. I bow to you. I will put on my rucksack. I forgot it and I feel like that. And you may stretch a little bit. Move your neck, your head, your shoulders. And feel free to change your position. And I'm really glad you are here. So now a little paper fell out. Just a moment, please. Here we are with the teachers. Teachers. Susan Moon is asking, do you have to have a teacher in order to practice Zen? Norman Fischer answers, again, this depends on your goals and intentions for the practice and, to some extent, your circumstances. Your question raises something we touched on earlier. What do we mean by practicing Zen? I have a friend who runs a hair salon. She's never studied Zen and doesn't know much about it, but she often says to me, I'm going to get my Zen on, by which she means she's going to stop rushing around and calm herself down, so she can relax and enjoy her life. A few years ago, I attended a conference on Zen and the media, in which Zen scholars and teachers discussed the various ways that Zen has been appropriated into our culture. I think there is a Zen cereal, a Zen fragrance, and probably lots of other products. I don't mind this. I don't find that Zen is a brand owned by the Zen Buddhist centers of the world. Zen might be an attitude, an approach to life, which is perhaps fostered by the practice and teachings of Zen Buddhism, but not limited to them. Maybe my friend's getting her Zen on is her version of Zen practice, her way of doing it. Maybe someone else reads a Zen book, learns something from it, and then feels as if she's practicing Zen by following what she has learned from the book. Maybe someone else reads the book and then starts a meditation practice on her own, practicing Zen in that way. Depending on what the person is after, any one of these things might well be enough. Zen is not limited to formal Zen practice with a Zen temple or teacher, all of which might be a lot of trouble. For some people, probably more trouble than it's worth, not what they are after. I am happy for Zen to have some positive influence on the world beyond what the teachings and practice of Zen Buddhism can provide. Susan, but earlier you said that Zen is a religion. Norman, yes, in the widest sense, as I've just been saying, Zen is an attitude and a feeling about life that you can practice in any way you want. In the strictest and most exact sense, Zen Buddhism is a religion with specific practices and observances. Going to a Zen place, studying teachings, going on retreats, experiencing Zen as it has been handed down from the past and is practiced in the present by initiated adherents, will deepen and broaden its possibilities for your life. If you take up the religious practice of Zen Buddhism, at some point you will meet a Zen teacher and be inspired to establish a practice relationship with her or him. I wouldn't say you must do this in order to practice Zen. In fact, although there are more and more qualified Zen teachers all the time, Zen teachers are still not as common as, say, physicians, psychotherapists, or rabbis. Many people who are serious about their Zen practice live in places where there are no Zen teachers, and certainly these people are practicing Zen without a teacher. But if you can find a teacher you have affinity with and practice regularly with that teacher, it will make a difference. The idea of a Zen teacher may be misleading. A Zen teacher isn't a person. A Zen teacher inevitably involves a world, a context. Zen teachers exist in the context of Zen teaching, Zen communities, a Zen practice environment. So finding a teacher means finding a community, a sangha, a teaching, a context. To have support, guidance and friendship for your practice, to have people you can communicate with who reflect your life back to you makes a big difference. It makes a big difference not to feel alone, not to rely only on yourself, not to feel that you are somehow making up your spiritual life out of your own head. So to study with a Zen teacher is to expand the context of your practice beyond yourself and your own ideas. Ideally, the teacher is someone who can express the practice not only through her or his words, but also through presence, conduct, and feeling. All of this is a Zen teacher, a context, a community, a living example of the teaching, and a relationship based on mutual trust and respect. I think it is pretty clear that if all of this were part of your Zen practice, it would make a difference. The classical model is living together with your teacher in a Zen monastic community. There are a few places in the West where you can do this, and it is invaluable and moving experience. But probably for most people this isn't possible. In the United States now there are many lay Zen communities that meet weekly or daily. Many of them have teachers guiding the practice. So finding a Zen teacher within an hour or less from where you're living is becoming increasingly possible in this country. The Internet opens the possibility of listening to Dharma talks online and developing a sense of a particular teacher's style and approach to the teachings. Most Zen retreats are open and accessible, so it is not that difficult to attend. Oh, where was I? So it is not that difficult to attend. I have lost it. A moment, please. To attend a retreat, a sesshin given by the teacher you've been listening to online, even if it's halfway across the country. By continuing to listen and coming back to sesshin once a year, or even more, you can get to know and be known by the teacher and the community, so that it's actually possible in our time to study significantly and regularly with a teacher who might live thousands of miles away. In fact, there are many everyday Zen practitioners who practice in just this way. For me, the main quality to be developed in relationship with a teacher is trust, profound trust, not so much in the individual teacher, but through the relationship with the teacher to develop trust in the practice, in the Dharma, in life, and ultimately in yourself, not as a limited, conditioned individual, but as an expression of the truth of your life, of all life. To drink. The great possibility of Zen practice is to completely trust life, to have full confidence in your life, whatever happens. Trust isn't abstract. It's more than belief or faith. It develops through living, communicating, feeling what a life brings. The relationship to the teacher is a vehicle for this profound trust. And the teacher should be trustworthy, transparent, and unselfish enough to allow that trust to dawn in you without getting in the way. Teachers, if they are lucky, will be deeply respected by their students. That's a good thing, and it is necessary for the process that I'm talking about to work. At some stages, there is a degree of unrealistic projection involved in such respect. But I think that is okay, as long as the teacher doesn't believe in those projections. I'm lucky to have practiced with people who have held me in high regard. I notice that I definitely prefer this to being reviled, scorned, or ignored. But when a practitioner sees me in an unrealistically positive light, I recognize that it's not really me they are seeing, nor, if they revile me, is it necessarily really me they are reviling. They are seeing their own noble desire to find within themselves an ultimate respect and dignity. They are seeing their own love for and hope in the Dharma. Not believing in the projections might be easier said than done. As it is now, Zen teachers aren't required to get any particular training in psychology. They might not have any understanding of transference or realize how vulnerable their students are. Is there something the American Zen community could do about this? This is an important... I'm sorry. Susan has said the last sentences. Let me repeat them, please. Susan asks, not believing in the projections might be easier said than done. As it is now, Zen teachers aren't required to get any particular training in psychology. They might not have any understanding of transference or realize how vulnerable their students are. Is there something the American Zen community could do about this? Norman answers, "This is an important question, but I think it's too soon for us to answer it. The Western Zen movement is relatively new. We're still trying to work out how traditional Zen practice fits into and doesn't fit into our contemporary Western psychology and ethos. This process of fitting goes both ways. Zen has to be different to fit us, but we have to be different to fit Zen. Practicing with a Zen teacher has its own cultural form and logic. We shouldn't be too quick to assume this spiritual relationship conforms to our own cultural templates. In one sense, I'm not a very good person to respond to this question. I have only a basic layman's understanding of psychology and have never been in therapy. Many Western Zen and other Buddhist teachers have extensive training in psychology. Many are psychologists themselves, and many who are not psychologists have found it important and useful to be in therapy. But my relative ignorance of Western psychology could be an advantage. Buddhism has its own psychology, which I have studied. This psychology has parallels too, but is not the same as Western psychology. It may be a mistake to assume that Western psychology has the answers that Buddhist psychology lacks, or that Western Buddhist teachers need to train in Western psychology in order to be saved from the psychological naivety of the Buddhist tradition. Maybe not knowing so much about Western psychology helps me to better see the possibilities in Buddhism for our culture. And yes, let's not forget the many mistakes that have been made in the Zen teacher-student relationship in the short history of Zen in the West. I have certainly learned from these mistakes, having lived through many of them, both as a student and a teacher. And I'm still learning. So far I don't have any definite answers to your question, and I would frankly be skeptical of anyone who says she has this figured out. In any case, fortunately, it is not up to me or you to solve this problem. The sum total of us who practice Zen in the West, variously trained as we are, in brackets, maybe my training and practice as a writer are also part of the equation, brackets closed, will come to some greater understanding as time goes on. Next question by Susan Moon. What is a Zen teacher? Who is a Zen teacher? How do you get to be a Zen teacher? This depends on which Zen tradition you are talking about. In some Zen traditions, there is a koan curriculum and a more or less reasonable sense of mastery of that material, as well as skill in teaching, is required. Those who pass the curriculum, who exhibit teaching skill and manage to have a successful long-term apprenticeship relationship with a qualified Zen teacher, can also eventually be certified as Zen teachers by their teachers. In our Soto tradition, the matter is a little murkier. We don't have a specific curriculum to master or a specific sense of what a skillful teacher should be. For us, the main values are faith, commitment, stability, and reliability in practice. So we think less in terms of teachers and teaching, and more in terms of fully ordained priests or lay and trustees. That is, lay and priest practitioners who having established long-term relationships with teachers in the practice, have gone through precepts-taking rituals, and have thereby made strong commitments and vows to continue the practice themselves for a lifetime, and to help others to practice in whatever way they can. We trust that what the world calls teachers will emerge from this group of seasoned and committed practitioners. This is not to say that we don't have a program of study and practice. Of course we do. We expect those who are qualified to be teachers to have practiced for several decades, to have said so many sessions they have lost count, to have studied lots of sutras and other texts, heard many hundreds of Dhamma talks, and to have demonstrated through various stages of supervised teaching that they can encourage the spiritual practice of others with grace and compassion. After the course of many years of practice, their teachers will confer empowering ceremonies on such seasoned lay and priest practitioners, and their training will be deemed complete, which means they are ready to start over again, trying to appreciate the practice and share it with others. In our tradition, we don't pay so much attention to the distinction between those who are talented and not, skilled or not, knowledgeable or not. Anyone who practices faithfully for a long time can receive empowerments. Teachers are eventually chosen from among this group of qualified and seasoned practitioners by students who see teachers in them. So some qualified priests and lay trustees become teachers in the obvious external sense. Others continue to practice simply, teaching in more mysterious and less obvious ways. Susan, is it okay to have several teachers and not one main teacher? Norman, most people have several teachers. This is a good thing. There are so many good forms of Buddhist practice that it makes sense to study in more than one. And there are issues of practicality. Which teachers happen to come through town, which town you happen to live in, or have moved to after having lived for some time in another town. So yes, your life will take you to different locations, or teachers may relocate, so you will have various teachers. Or perhaps, as your practice changes, you may find it important to change teachers, just as in other areas in your life in which you will have various mentors for the various interests and pursuits you are involved with. At the same time, though, studying Zen with a teacher is different. To take up committed study with one Zen teacher for a long time, even as your life circumstances and your interests change, brings an added dimension to your practice. More depth, more feeling, more appreciation of what Zen and what life is about. You can see what I'm getting at by reflecting on other relationships in your life. Having a lot of friendships or romantic relationships is certainly broadening and interesting, maybe even exciting. But it is not the same as having one long-term committed relationship. Longevity of commitment makes a difference in spiritual practice, just as it does in other human relationships. Being committed to a teacher doesn't mean you have to see her or him a lot. But when the commitment is clear and the feeling of commitment strong, even distance and time can be overcome. There is the story of the Zen teacher Nyogen Sensaki, whom I mentioned earlier, who was one of the first Japanese Zen teachers in America. When World War II came, it was impossible for him to see or even communicate with his Japanese teacher for some years. He expressed his ongoing engaged relationship by making prostrations every day facing the Pacific. But being committed to one teacher for a long time doesn't necessarily mean that you only study with that one teacher. You might also go to programs with other teachers, or if the community is large, as ours is, has several qualified teachers in it, you might study with several of them. But it will be clear who is your primary teacher and with whom the special transformative relationship is being lived out. In a healthy community, all the teachers will respect and understand these relationships and distinctions and abide by them with harmony and understanding. In fact, it is usually a good thing, after studying with one teacher for a while, to go forth to experience other teachers, even as you remain with that teacher. This is broadening and not confusing once you have established a point of view of your own, based on your long study with your primary teacher. Susan, is it okay to change teachers? Yes, says Norman, and it happens all the time. Maybe your teacher dies, or as I was saying, maybe your teacher moves to another town, or you move, and it seems best to change teachers. Or maybe you just come to the end of your time together. When these changes happen, it is important to have a face-to-face conversation and come to mutual agreement and peacefulness about the changes that need to happen. A commitment is a commitment, however, and one doesn't change it lightly. There are often problems between teachers and students, just as there are problems in all human relationships. When problems come up, you have to figure out how to work them through, and doing this with your teacher can be a big learning experience. Sometimes, especially in the beginning, you might say little and mostly just go along with what the teacher is proposing. It makes sense in a certain way. If you are practicing with a Zen teacher so that your life and view can be transformed, why would you reject the teacher's view because you don't happen to agree with it? Getting past your own point of view would be part of the point. So usually, most practitioners are happy to take up the teacher's view in the beginning. That's how you learn. But after a while, when you have begun to get a feel for the practice, you may have a view that differs from your teacher's, and you may feel compelled to disagree or make a fuss. Or maybe the teacher will somehow feel compelled to register some complaints with you. I have found that every teacher-student relationship is different because every person is different. Sometimes the teacher is old and the student is young. Sometimes the student is older than the teacher, with more life experience and more worldly heft. The gender of teacher and student makes a difference. Cultural and personal background make a difference. Education and interests make a difference. And apart from all this, one person is simply always different from another. So every student-teacher relationship is going to be different. There are classical models in the literature for teacher-student relationships, but in fact, such models hardly ever exist. I noticed that in some significant way, I'm a different person in relation to each person I practice with. And as with all intimate human relationships, most of what happens isn't conscious or discussable. Ultimately, the relationship to a teacher is more or less than a personal one. In the end, the point is to fully internalize and transcend the teacher, that is, to fully digest the teacher's approach to the Dharma, be transformed by it, and then to go beyond it, to find your own way. It's a commonplace piece of lore in Zen that the student would surpass the teacher. For years I reflected on this. If each disciple surpasses her or his teacher, and if I'm the 92nd generation from Buddha, in brackets, as my lineage document says, then does this mean I have surpassed Buddha by a factor of 92? I doubt it. To surpass your teacher means simply that you find your own way, your own expression, your uniqueness. Respecting and honoring your teacher, having a full and complete relationship with her or him, is having that same relationship with yourself and with everyone. You are the teacher. Everyone is the teacher. To really know this and live it according to Zen, you need to have a teacher. Let me have a look how long this is so that I can take a decision whether we break it up in the middle and continue next time. It seems quite long, and I think to digest it fully, yes, it's nice to. It's nice. I think we will stop in some minutes. Susan Moon asks, I know that everybody is human, including Zen teachers. But how human is it acceptable for a Zen teacher to be? Can a person be a good Zen teacher even if he or she does what I think are unethical things? Where should I draw the line? Norman. Yes, Zen teachers are human and do human things. Like other humans, they make mistakes. Your question is very precise, even if he or she does what I think are unethical things. As I said a moment ago, sometimes, especially in the beginning, you just have to trust the teacher. I have noticed that sometimes when people feel that Zen teachers or others do or say something they don't like, they consider such words and deeds to be unethical. But often it isn't actually a matter of ethics. It's that the excuse me. It's that the teacher is behaving in ways you find offensive. It seems important that we give our teachers the benefit of the doubt. Probably we would be better off giving everyone the benefit of the doubt, even more so the Zen teacher with whose help we are supposed to be learning something we don't yet know about life. But of course, it is entirely possible that Zen teachers could behave reprehensibly, unkindly, if not unethically, and yes, sometimes unethically. Unethical conduct is always a problem. It is hurtful, it is damage. But it is an even bigger problem when a spiritual leader indulges in it. Since a spiritual teacher is the repository of our faith in the practice and the tradition, he or his unethical conduct can be enormously destructive, eroding the faith of many people, sometimes even causing despair and all sorts of irrational behavior in response. So it is extremely important for Zen teachers to follow precepts and be careful in their conduct, and for students never to go along with the teacher's unethical behavior. On the other hand, an excessive focus on ethical conduct can cause a Zen teacher to be uptight, constantly worried that one false word will ruin people's lives. That's not good either. Zen teachers also have to be examples of freedom, joy, and ease in the practice. In order to actually feel this, Zen teachers have to practice what they preach. They have to feel respect, regard, and identity with all living creatures, especially including the people they practice with, so that their spontaneous words and deeds won't be unkind or unethical. And if they fail in this, if they offend or transgress, they have to be capable of acknowledging, confessing, and repenting this, as we spoke about earlier. You ask where we draw the ethical line. This is difficult, of course. Some things are clear, and these days explicit in many Zen communities that have written ethical codes. Teachers should not have sexual affairs with students, should not use Sangha funds for their own personal needs, and so on. But often ethical breaches are subtle and hard to define, and Sangha members will define them differently. And what point, for instance, does a teacher's asserting her or his authority become psychological abuse? When is a community, inspired by the teacher's perhaps overly exalted place in it, going off course? For me, the most important safety factor is that within a Zen community everything be discussable. Anybody ought to be able to say how they feel about how things are going, especially if they feel something is wrong. If community members feel like certain things simply are not safe to be mentioned, then I think there is a problem. So, dear friends, dear guests here, I think this is a good answer we can stay with. What do you think? I would love to hear your opinions, but we have not an arrangement for it. So if you would like to have an arrangement for discussion afterwards, it would be nice if you wrote me. You can do it on Facebook, on my page. You can say, let's do it next time on Zoom. And then we have this possibility. But until now, it seemed that most people, or the few people that were here with me, were shy or not interested, or would probably be more motivated to discuss this stuff with Norman himself, which I fully understand. The other interaction I'm pointing at is, of course, one of practitioner to practitioner or student to student, just from our heart minds. And I truly think this is also very valuable. So I would love to have both ways of an exchange, and maybe we want to invite Roshi Fischer to a meeting. You can also give me your opinion to it, because I'm anyway thinking of this, to do this. Depends on when we do this, and depends on how many friends are really interested in it. So thank you. I'm thrilled. I'm absolutely happy about this project. I think we students, we should do it much more often. Just read the books. Isn't it great? I mean, I thought I knew the book, but some things I heard it as for the first time, and they got really into myself, and we could deepen this, intensify this by exchanging about it. So I will probably need in the future to read it a third time. But first, let me tell you the theme of our next meeting. If it's you who will be here, the next one is stages of practice. I can't wait. I really can't wait to read this too. And after stages of practice, we then have over the long haul, Sangha, everyday life and everyday relationships, Zen and art, and saving all sentient beings. One more interesting than the other. What do you think? So, I'm wishing you a wonderful rest of the day and a great Sunday, always with our solidarity and sorrow in our hearts. I kind of dedicated this reading to the shooted ones, to the killed ones. I did it silently, and let's pray for them and for the beloved ones, that their hearts may never turn to hate and what's the word? Let's remain with hate. It's enough. Thank you.